Hi, I'm Dave Rice. I'm the president of the United Nations Association of Orange County, and we're here at the Human Rights Day celebration at Soka University. That's been put on by our wonderful Ambassador of Human Rights, Sarah Bach.
Of indigenous culture, care for land, reciprocity, and shared duty form early moral law. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights did not invent dignity. It gathers the world's oldest moral life into one shared promise. And today, in a world stained by conflict, fear, and division, we return to these roots. Not to look back forward, but to remember what can still guide us to forward. This program was created with intention to reconnect culture with moral sense, to show that ancient values still protect modern lives, and to remind us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice of defend dignity anyway. After our UNOC President Dave shared his opening remark, we will continue with our UN Human Rights Day clip, including a reflection of ancient Persia heritage and the roots of justice. A reminder that the story of human rights is both global and deeply personal. Then our panelists will lead us across three cultures, Persia, Africa, and Latin America, not as separate histories, but as shared human heritage. Fairness, our force, empathy, our indifference, community, our isolation. Today you join a tradition older than any constitution, a tradition that says every person matters, every culture contributes, and every act of courage keeps humanity alive. Thank you for being here. Thank you for lending your presence, your attention, and your hope. And thank you for choosing to stand on the side of dignity. Welcome to Human Rights Day 2025 celebration. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you again, everyone, for taking time today to be here at this celebration event. My name is Dave Rice. I'm the president of United Nations Association of Orange County, and it's just reality and beliefs are around human rights, and that's why it's so important and so significant. And so it's worth having a day to come together and to look at it, to understand it better, and to discuss so many aspects of it, both the good and the bad of how we're doing and how we're not doing so well around human rights. And it's just wonderful to have so many like-minded people together who really care about this issue. And so, again, thank you so much for being here. I would encourage us all, I just found out today, I have a little book that I carry around. I don't know if you've seen it, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I don't know if anybody's seen this, but it's an awesome little book to have with you, because I find if we were to ask how many know or could recite the 30 human rights in the UDHR, how many would you know? Not many, right? I don't know all 30, and I don't know that many of them. I love one of them that says the right to democracy. That's a huge one, right? So what I found out is you can get this book on Kindle, if you have a Kindle, for 99 cents right now, and have it on your phone with you. So I just did it. I just downloaded it. It's awesome. I think I would highly recommend that for all of us. But anyway, we're really looking forward to this event with this wonderful, panel of speakers that Sarah has assembled together. There's going to be time for Q&A, but afterwards, if we don't get to all of that, there's plenty of time for refreshments and more talking and discussing, and I encourage you all to get to know each other and participate in that with each other. And last but not least, I really want to thank Sarah, our Human Rights Ambassador, for putting this event together, and just for her passion around human rights. You're so awesome, Sarah. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Every nation has a story. Every civilization has sought to define
Related to genocide studies for years. I'm personally honored to be part of this panel discussion today. So without further ado, I would like to jump right into it and introduce our speakers. Dr. Ari Babaknia is an MD and Johns Hopkins trained physician, currently serving as a health professor at Chapman University in Irvine. Renowned for pioneering work in minimally invasive surgery and laser-based medical treatments, he's earned numerous honors, such as the National Medical Research Award from the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. A prolific contributor to women's health, Dr. Babaknia has penned several books and over 50 scholarly articles. Beyond medicine, he's a champion of Persian culture and the arts. He founded the Persian Arts Foundation and holds positions on multiple cultural and scientific boards. His deep dive into Holocaust research resulted in a groundbreaking 4-volume series in Persian, which won the National Reference Book of the Year Award in 2013 at the Association of the Jewish Librarian. In the past decade, Dr. Babaknia has expanded his portfolio to include art, particularly in glass and ceramics, addressing themes of social justice and human rights. And you can see some of these here in the courtyard after the presentation. This endeavor earned him the Norvus Award in Art in 2022. His extensive collection of over 500 artworks in glass and ceramics celebrates human rights as well as Iran's historical and cultural richness. The next speaker will be SUA's own Dr. Chika Esiobu. Dr. Esiobu's professional work is fundamentally grounded in the exploration of indigenous knowledge as a foundational pathway to individual, community, and societal transformation and planetary renewal. Her research interests in indigenous knowledge are diverse and include traditional medicine, traditional ecological knowledge, agroecology, indigenous education, and culture. Dr. Esiobu's TED Talk, How Africa Can Use Its Traditional Knowledge to Make Progress, has garnered critical acclaim. She has been privileged to share her insights at distinguished platforms such as Yale University, the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine, the London School of Economics, and the African Union. Dr. Esiobu has conducted indigenous knowledge-based research in parts of Africa in collaboration with global organizations, including the United Nations, the World Bank, the International Development Research Center Canada, and the Swedish International Development Agency, SIDA. Dr. Esiobu currently holds a teaching position here at Soka University. And last but not least, Dr. Tomas Crowder-Taraborelli is a scholar and educator specializing in Latin American studies, human rights, and documentary film. His work focuses on the intersections of memory and visual culture. Crowder-Taraborelli has contributed to numerous academic publications and has been actively involved in the editorial collective of the journal Latin American Perspectives. Among other publications, he's the co-editor of Film and Genocide and the political documentary in Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay. He has also co-edited 3 special issues for Latin American Perspectives on topics such as political documentary film and video in the Southern Cone, 1950 to 2000, media, politics, and democratization in Latin America, and COVID-19, the coronavirus, pandemic politics in Latin America, which was a 2-volume special issue. Dr. Crowder-Taraborelli is the co-host of Editor's Choice with a former SUA student, Alexander Scott. This is a Latin American Perspectives produced podcast. Finally, Dr. Crowder-Taraborelli has taught several courses here at SUA, including Introduction to Latin American Studies, Introduction to the Pacific Basin, Human Rights in Latin America, Documenting International Atrocities, and has led learning cluster trips with students to Argentina, Brazil, and to the US-Mexico border. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with the panelists. Our first speaker will be Dr. Babaknia.
Thank you. That video, I think, was a copy of my speech. So, I'm delighted to be here. And it was amazing, few words that, or few sentences that were said in the video that it's really amazing. I want to repeat them to for it can sit a little bit more well. One of them says human rights. What happened in Persia 2,500 years ago shows that human rights is not an invention of our time. Talking 2,600 years ago about justice, diversity, moral courage, peace, balance, shared dignity, live and let live. Amazing. As it was said a couple of times, beyond being a physician and university teacher, I have been doing some art about human rights and social justice. And that thing really started by Cyrus, inspired by Cyrus from old time, and also somebody who was one of the principles of creating that human rights declaration in 1948, Raphael Lemkin. So I have done a few hundred pieces, maybe about 60, 70 of them are about Cyrus and his work. And one of the major rooms in my home is dedicated to Cyrus. So about 60 pieces of Cyrus is in that room. And last May, about 6 months ago or so, at about 50 graduate students at my home for graduation, and with few faculties. And one of the faculty asked me, what is your fascination with this Cyrus? And I told him that I show you two things, two decrees, or two words, or that he told us, he left us 2,500 years ago, how fascinating they were. And I thought in year 2025, we've been practicing it, but we see that no, world is going the other way around. One was, I don't know how many, I didn't exactly know the date. How many of us know the exact date that Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves in America? It was 165 years ago, January 1st, 1861. Cyrus did that 2,600 years ago. One of these first decrees, when he went to Babylon, or rather when he freed the slaves from slavery. But what's really hit me, and I think it's one of the greatest lessons for human rights, and now we see the violation of that even now today, is the other decree. That he says, we would not allow anyone to be tortured in our lands, plural, lands. I don't know, again, I didn't know that. How many of us know that the lands that Cyrus was captured and was ruling over has been in history the vastest site of the land in history. So when you say lands, means from where to where. Cyrus cylinder was discovered in a place, they call it Susa, at the border of Iran and Iraq, Shush, which was told at the time, in the ancient time, they called it Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia today is Iraq. I say a word which may resonate with some of you, it may not with some of the younger one. Abu Ghraib or Abu Ghraib. 20 years ago today, this month, November, December of 2025, in Abu Ghraib, Mesopotamia, we were torturing, waterboarding people in a place that 2,600 years ago this great man says, we do not allow. And our claim was, it's not in our land, but it was our lands then. So that shows the greatness of the mind, soul, and spirit of this guy. It's amazing. In the same land that he said that, today they're torturing girls, 15 years old kids. So that's what that word is. Human rights is not the invention of our time. It's been there. The sad part is, even now, with all the so-called civilization that we have gone and we have gone through, it's not being implemented, it's not being practiced. So I feel very privileged that at this stage of my life, in the past 10 years, I've been dedicating my time. I wanted to do art all my life. In fact, when I went to university, without my parents knowing, I registered for architect. And I was accepted, and also accepted at medical school. And having a Jewish mother, you know which one I have to choose. And I'm glad in a way that I did chose medicine, because I helped 3,000 mothers to have babies, special babies, infertility babies. And then after me, 2 brothers followed me to medical school. And I'm glad I started art at an older, wiser age, so I just don't do white only art for beauty, art for humanity, art for social justice, human rights, children's rights, women's rights, climate changes, climate crisis, and so on, so forth, and from all over the world. And so I stop here, and then if there's anything that we have to discuss, we can. There is a couple of minutes that I have right now. We can use those. Yeah, you've been showing me. Oh, beautiful. These are samples of the artwork that I have done, so you can go through them one by one. Or you have been. That's good. Okay. These are ceramics and also glass art. In fact, I have an art show next weekend at the Newport Beach City Hall, Saturday 2 to 7 p.m. Anybody who wants to come, they're more than welcome. Or give me your email, or give your email to Sarah. I'll be happy to send you an invitation. So, as I said, I feel honored, privileged, and blessed to be able to use art. Art is a beautiful language, universal language, especially for children. younger people, they can relate to it. With one piece of art, you can really teach someone as much as a book. Because kids, human beings, are attracted to beauty. So the beauty of these pieces attracts people, and I'm hoping that the substance of what is in them will keep. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Babaknia. And now we'll turn our attention to Dr. Esiobu.
And I'll probably just step back a few thousand years, some thousand years from when Cyrus lived to when humanity started, as has been established by the validity of radiocarbon dating. So for centuries there were debates about the origin of modern humans until radiocarbon dating established the fact that we all came out of Africa. And from Africa we dispersed the rest of the world. So we are all Africans, right? And Africa is the oldest continent, and we perhaps left behind the Ubuntu philosophy in our dispersal, even to build ideas around our environment, around our situations, and the peculiar circumstances that people met in Asia, in North America, in South America, and the rest of the world. So when we understand that we are dealing with the oldest philosophy that allowed humanity to thrive for centuries before the dispersal happened, then perhaps we will come to better appreciate the Ubuntu philosophy as a human philosophy, not just as a philosophy of a continent, but a human philosophy that the whole humanity will benefit from, perhaps taking a second look at in the times we live in today. And I will start with a quote, Umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu. And that is a Zulu word for a person is a person through other people. I am not alone. If I thrive in isolation, then I am not thriving. If my thriving denies someone else of their own thriving, then I question that thriving. And that is the whole idea behind the concept of Ubuntu. It is about the fact that our collective consciousness is tied, and that we cannot succeed without other people succeeding. So this goes contrary, of course, to what we have today with the whole neoliberal agenda really advancing rapidly around the world, where it's about competition, individualism, my achievements, what I have been able to do and throw around and show how better I am than the next person. It's the complete opposite. So Ubuntu philosophy, Ubuntu worldview, maybe we should use worldview, just to see it from that really more central perspective, is about understanding the fact that except I consider other people's happiness and comfort, then my comfort can only last for a while. And of course we're getting to see that today in the fact that we thought we could. Extract as much as possible from the earth, and thank you so much. Yes, we can extract as much as possible from the earth and get rich for ourselves, but then we see it all circling back to us. We drink the same underground water at the end of the day. The sun shines on all of us, even if we've made so much money from these huge factories that have destroyed the ecosystem. At the end of the day, our trying to conserve resources and use it for our own selves end up really not working that way. If everyone suffers, we also suffer ourselves, and that's talking about the environment. And Ubuntu worldview can be applied in every aspect of life. So when we think of human rights, for example, and we think of justice, Ubuntu philosophy focuses on restorative justice, much more than retributive justice. And restorative justice says if a member of society or community is hurting, because hurting people hurt others, When someone harms someone, it's because there's something in them that is not right, and they don't see that humanity in the person that they are hurting. So if someone within a community hurts someone else, then the whole community should focus on restoring the humanity of this person who has gone out of way to hurt another person, much more than banishment and condemning this person as evil and no more a part of us. How do we restore the humanity of someone who has, perhaps through some personal experiences, upbringing, something that might have gone wrong, they walked away from that worldview of seeing the other person as much human as themselves. And that's where we think of restorative justice. And one of the things about human rights in this concept is that it is also about community rights. It is not just human rights about that single person hoping that the world will revolve, around them to understand what they need and all of that. It's about saying that we need to also consider the community from where this person comes from, not just one individual. And that's what it's all about. Ubuntu emphasizes interconnectedness, compassion, and community over individualism, over competition, over focusing on what we can get for ourselves and perhaps our immediate families. It promotes dialogue, empathy, and shared responsibility to resolve conflicts. It could be commercial conflicts, it could be environmental conflicts, it could be interpersonal conflicts, social conflicts. It looks at how we can interact in order to stabilize this equilibrium that might have occurred in our shared consciousness and living. And Archbishop Desmond Tutu of Cape Town in South Africa popularized Ubuntu after the apartheid ended and South Africa was looking to move forward. Nelson Mandela, of course, from the time he was imprisoned, wrote about, as much as he could within that circumstances, the fact that a free South Africa would not be about turning the table to make the formerly oppressed become the oppressors. It's about ensuring that those who oppress others are restored to their humanity, of seeing the people they formerly oppressed as being as much human as themselves. And that's how lasting peace will come, right? Because if we turn the table to start retributive justice, to judge and banish and condemn, over time resentment will grow again, and we start that cycle all over again. And that was when Archbishop Desmond Tutu wrote about Ubuntu and said we must look for a way to restore the humanity of the former oppressors. They did what they did because they lacked compassion and understanding of the humanness of every single person in South Africa. And it was through that the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission came about. And we know that today South Africa is a more stable, it's a society in progress. There's no mistaking about that. But it could have been worse. It could have been worse if not for this foundation that was laid for the progress of the country. And finally, Rwanda. After the genocide, Rwanda needed to move forward. And there were no lawyers, there were no judges, the judicial system was almost non-existent. How could the country move forward? And they went back to this traditional justice system, Gacaca. Gacaca, again, is about restorative justice. How do we restore the people who killed their neighbors, who killed their wives just because they married from a different ethnicity? How do we restore their humanness to again begin to see these people that they saw as enemies as human? And the power of dialogue, the power of community was able to build that foundation. Today, Rwanda is an example in Africa. As we also understand that there are unique challenges just like, but it could have been worse if not that Gacaca became the foundation for restoring justice in Rwanda. So there are quite a few examples out there, but Ubuntu is a worldview that the world should begin to re-examine as it concerns relationship with human beings, with the planet, the ecosystem. It's critical at this time to centralize the idea of Ubuntu in such conversations. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Our final speaker, Dr. Crowder Taravarelli, who is going to discuss Latin America.
Hello everyone, thank you so much to the organizers and my fellow presenters. I wrote a little reflection for today. The preservation of collective memory must be a shared endeavor to convince community members that safeguarding memory is as essential as protecting the environment that sustains their lives. Communities must first recognize the value in the working of memory. As Haitian historian Michel Fauve-Tourio argues in his monumental work, Silencing the Past, we're not prisoners of our past. History is the fruit of power, but power itself is never so transparent that its analysis becomes superfluous. The ultimate mark of power may be its invisibility. The ultimate challenge, the exposition of its roots. For the last 50 years, human rights organizations and social movements in Latin America have worked tirelessly to document human rights abuses and compile evidence to prosecute perpetrators. Human rights education has been a top priority for these organizations. Victims have given testimony in the press, in courtrooms, as well as in the classrooms. Academics have contributed by building a critical, multidisciplinary approach to collecting evidence, representing the violence perpetrated against the victims, and building empathy with the community. Their testimonies move us closer to the edge of the abyss of violence victims and their families endure. Human rights activists have also been instrumental in developing alliances with state-elected officials, museum curators, forensic anthropologists, filmmakers, and artists to preserve clandestine detention centers and convert them into spaces of memory. The former Navy School Detention and Extermination Center in Buenos Aires, ex-ESMA, is one of these spaces where Dr. Wilson, faculty from the University of Buenos Aires, and I hosted the Visible Evidence Conference in 2017. For us, the ESMA complex is not only a space to remember the disappeared, the victims of torture, the women whose babies were appropriated by state terrorist actors, but also a space of reflection and hope in the capacity of our communities to defend the value of life and human rights. These spaces are in situ archives of memory with very different histories of development. Memory sites are designed in different ways to be immersive, attempting to offer visitors a sensory experience. Sites mix use of audio and video testimony, and both functions as visitor spaces, as well as sites of mourning, art galleries, and conference centers. According to Barbara Sutton, the ways in which people come to terms with horrific past events such as wars, genocides, and acts of terrorism are not static or univocal. They are part of a dynamic process of memory construction. Last year, during Human Rights Day, I spoke about the threat of newly elected Argentine President Javier Milei to memory, truth, and justice. Milei has repeatedly challenged the established number of victims killed by the last dictatorship, 30,000. Milei recently named Minister of Defense the son of Roque Presti, who commanded the 7th Infantry Regiment of La Plata during the dictatorship. The president has also defunded the ex-ESMA Memory Museum and frequently mocks the work of human rights activists, calling them the rip-off of human rights, el curro de los derechos humanos. A critical part of these campaigns is the deployment of an army of bots and social media influencers who fuel polarization among voters, families, and friends. In our post-pandemic world, life for Latin Americans is getting harder. Right-wing governments supported by Washington and its reanimated Monroe Doctrine have strengthened their commitment to austerity policies on the pretext of controlling inflation. The rollback of social services, the firing of thousands of state employees, the significant loss of purchasing power, in some cases up to 30%, the financialization of everything, and the further erosion of labor rights has sent millions below the poverty line. Government economic teams promise voters a brighter future as long as they are aligned to the interests of corrupted and corruptible political elites and their business cronies. A new Cold War is underway as the United States and China struggle to find more solid footing in a region that can provide raw materials, including rare earth minerals for tech development, lithium, graphite, copper, nickel, uranium, cobalt, and other minerals. Just a few months ago, after the press exposed yet another corruption scandal within the Milei administration, this time involving a bribery scheme inside the country's disability agency, the US government, led by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, pledged to rescue Argentina's failing economy with a $40 billion loan package funded by US taxpayers. This announcement helped secure Milei's victory in the midterm election, further empowering him to continue his campaign of memory erasure. Although this ambition is driven by the imperatives of capital accumulation, Milei also understands that this moment offers him a unique opportunity to rewrite the country's human rights history. Technological dependency, especially our addiction to social media, is turning people into consumers of digital commodities that exist outside of lived physical time. A new kind of temporality now pulses through our phones, which have become the primary site where social interaction is expected to occur. Those who decide to opt out, who decline to be part of the epistemic regime of generated AI, are deemed to be culturally, economically, and socially expendable. Will the logic of capitalism, its drive for perpetual growth, continue unchecked? Will people's voices be heard as they struggle to protect their environments? Will the traditions that Latin Americans hold dear be erased by compelling algorithmic offerings or by techno-financial automatisms, as Franco Berardi categorized them? And will the sci-fi future envisioned by tech autocrats and their political cronies spread across the world as a new mantra of efficiency and spiritual renewal, perhaps contributing to the disintegration of solidarity? The challenges are immense. As the quality of life in Latin America deteriorates under the criminal takeover of businesses and public institutions by cartels, paramilitary groups, and corrupt officials, social movements must constantly reorganize to regain strength, legitimacy, and the capacity to protect their communities. The so-called culture wars, fueled in part by paid media personalities, have escalated violence to such a degree that many young voters have lost faith in political participation to improve the lives of their neighbors. After all, who would be willingly join a political circus in which one's life becomes an object of surveillance and one's social media feeds a potential site of retaliation? Meanwhile, the profitable pursuit of likes and views keeps raising the threshold of what is considered tolerable, eroding respect for what we once held dear: meaningful conversation, empathy and solidarity in the face of suffering, and the desire to work alongside others to improve their lives of the excluded. It is no coincidence that Guillermo del Toro's recent depiction of the creature in Frankenstein has resonated so deeply with millions. Monsters are driven by an obsession with control, an impulse to maximize efficiency and eliminate anything or anyone that might challenge their pursuit of transcending death. As anxiety descends upon us, one cannot help but look back at the history of moments when societies found ways to confront existential crises. There were leaders who devoted much of their lives to speaking about and reinvigorating the principles that inspired their communities to pursue justice. Alongside them were partners, some vocal, some silent, marching in solidarity, a testament to the power of grassroots movements to generate, change, and protect the sanctity of life. Dictatorships came to an end, and economic policies that had condemned millions to poverty were reimagined. As Martin Luther King Jr. said in his speech, Beyond Vietnam, a time to break silence, to an audience at the Riverside Church in New York City in 1967, If we do not act, we shall surely be dragged down the long, dark, and shameful corridors of time reserved for those who possess power without compassion, might without morality, and strength without sight. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all the presenters. Can you hear me? I heard so many wonderful, incredible things from all of your presentations. Thank you. Starting with Sarah's opener, reminding us that human rights is a tradition that is older than any institution. And I think that was definitely echoed in our first two presenters' presentations. I have like a bunch of random notes that I want to say before I open up a dialogue. Also from the video, heritage is not frozen in time, it moves with the people. I think this idea is echoed by the presentations that we heard today as well. And that human rights are not only remembered but lived. Dr. Babaknia reminded us, and as Tomas as well, that the world, quote, the world seems to be going the other way around right now. Mentioning the Abu Ghraib torture history reminded me, I wanted to do just a little mention that in the back of the room you see a lot of publications in a glass case. And one of those publications is called Fall Girls by SUA faculty member Dr. Ryan Caldwell. And that book, I mean, we have a lot of SUA students here today. I don't even know if some of you realize that that entire book is about Abu Ghraib and her experience as an expert witness sociologist in some of those trials. Another thing that came across in the presentations is this idea that art is a universal language. I really loved the common theme of ancient traditions, art, as well as scholarship. In Dr. Esiobu's presentation, we were introduced to the idea of the Ubuntu worldview, which stresses interconnectedness, compassion, dialogue, in order to resolve conflicts, as well as successful examples of restorative justice in Rwanda and South Africa. The emphasis on community rights and the idea that those who repressed others are restored to humanity. They have to be restored to their humanity because oppression is an example of a lacking of compassion. And then finally, in Tomas's presentation, we heard a lot about collective memory as a shared endeavor. I love the quote that, I think it was Trio, the ultimate mark of power is its invisibility. So overall, we heard some shared themes, I think, but presented in different ways. Themes of antiquity, art, ancient and modern, hope, compassion around human rights traditions around the world. We heard about concepts and traditions, like I said, such as restorative justice, but also social justice and neoliberalism. So I'd like to spend a little bit of time with the panelists, inviting them to speak to each other's presentations if you wish, and also I'll just throw out an opener question, so whatever you'd like to do for a few minutes before we open the Q&A to the audience. Maybe we can start with a question about courage. And this, each of you could answer this if you want, however you'd like, but in your work, what does courage look like when carrying cultural values into modern human rights debates? Especially in, as Tomas pointed out, our particularly anxious times right now.
Talking about courage. I am stunned. I don't know really what word to find for the courage that I see in the young girls, young women in Iran today. In America, honestly, I'm hesitant, scared to talk about it now here in America, in the university. And a 15 years old girl, she knows that she's going to be arrested, tortured, even killed. But for the basic human rights, the most basic, which is freedom, she's going up there. So I think, I love the word courage. In fact, yesterday was the head of public health at Chapman University, and yesterday was the graduation, and I gave the keynote speaker, and my talk was about moral courage. That this is really even there in medicine. Moral courage is the principle and the basic element that keeps you out of trouble and create a difference between what's a physician and what's a real great physician. And even not courage in a global way, even courage in the personal ways. I was telling them that in medicine or in surgery, being courageous has some limits. I have been telling my medical student that a great surgeon is the one who knows what to do, a good surgeon, but a great one is the one who has the courage to know his limits and not what to do, not to harm. So that's one of the greatest assets in human life, human dignity, and keeping the society going forward and being a civilized society. It's, I wrote, as was mentioned in my bio, I spent about 10 years of my life writing books about genocides, all the genocides of the 20th century. And I realized that the layer we call civilization, how thin and how fragile that layer is. And if you don't have courage to stand when we see the human rights being violated, violation of one right is violation of everybody's right. So I think that word is one of the most precious words for humanity to stay alive.
Okay. When I think of courage, I just imagined while living in Rwanda some years back, the victims, those whose family members were killed during the genocide, forgiving the people who killed their family members, and not just saying I forgive you, but indeed welcoming them into their homes to share food with them, because those perpetrators apologized and went through a social reorientation process that made them see that it was propaganda and falsehood that made them dehumanize the Tutsi population in this instance. One story I encountered actually had one of the perpetrators marrying a daughter out of the family where he killed the head of the father in the family, marrying the surviving daughter, and the last time I checked, they still are living happily, they had children, and some perpetrators going to offer themselves as the sons of women who they killed their children and saying, whatever a son could have done for you, I will do it for you. And they are going to cultivate their farmlands they really are being there for them in every way, possible. I do see unimaginable courage in the eyes of those women, really sincerely saying, I believe in your goodness, in your innate goodness as a human being like me. You were misled because of certain lies you were made to believe, but I'm glad that we can now build community together as human beings. So forgiveness takes courage, an unimaginable courage, and that's really what we need today to rebuild society in every way. And of course the same in South Africa, which is a society in progress, still again working towards a vision of equity and brotherhood, if you may. But I do see former people who were formerly oppressed under apartheid opening up themselves to again still be in a kind of societal relationship with the former oppressors. And even the fact that, like Mugabe did in Zimbabwe, successive regimes in South Africa have not come out to seize land from white owners is a symbol of courage. Nothing stops them from doing that, but we still see this attempt at negotiating, trying to dialogue through the process of land redistribution. Some may see that as cowardly, but if we look at it in the way it would have gone, inciting violence in young people, it is courageous to keep believing that at some point the white holders of land property in South Africa will come to say, this is not just right. How do we redistribute in a way that will ensure that everyone here is considered human and able to own property? Hopefully, dialogue can lead to that. But that's courage, at this point in time. So those are the two stories I'll probably used to talk about courage. Discuss that under Ubuntu philosophy. Thank you.
Those were two excellent responses. So I think both of them, to me, highlight one thing I always think about when I think of courage, not so much individual courage, but collective courage. That's the type of courage that moves me when people negotiate their difference, come together, and they struggle and they fight for the common good. Like many organizations in Latin America have done that, and they have a long legacy of still fighting. Even today, as the mothers of Plaza Mayo are dying, only a few are left. That they still march if they can in wheelchairs, and they show up to events, and they are a testimony to that collective courage.
Thank you. I would also invite, if you have questions for each other at any point, just let me know. But otherwise, I'll move on to another question before we open up to Q&A from the audience.
Chrissy, I
Yes.
want to make sometimes as a teacher, I think repeating things make it sink in better. Dr. Crowder talked about memory erosion. As I said, I wrote books about the genocide, human genocide. Elie Wiesel, which is my teacher for the Holocaust and genocide, has beautiful words about memory erosion. And he said the real death of the victims of the genocides are when we forgot, we keep forgetting, eroding their memories. And because of what I heard from him, I created a foundation, which we call it Memora Foundation, which I am about. I've already purchased the sites for it, creating a museum for Memora Museum in Orange County within the next few months. I think keeping the memory of those victims, let me talk about the past 100 years, from Armenian genocide to the Holocaust, Cambodian, Rwanda, Darfur. I think talking about them, it keeps this on our mind and keeps us on our toes to be vigilant, to make sure that who we chose, who we're choosing for our leaders, which I think makes a difference.
Thank you. So maybe I'll just offer one more question for each of our panelists. What shared principles across Persian, African, and Latin American thought can strengthen cooperation today?
I think it's unfortunately the world is disrupted. I think that's one of the fears. Honestly, I'm not a scholar, I'm a student of the Holocaust. Things that I see happening right now in the world, it's so much reminding me of what I was reading in early 1930s in Europe. And a few years ago, they said that, hey, let's give him the chance, let's give him a chance, or let's give him these radicals a chance in the world. And one of the professors from Harvard, I don't recall his name right now, yes I do, David Gergen, is president of the Kennedy School of Human Rights at Harvard. And he said, we did, the world did in 1933, and we saw the end results. Why don't we learn from it?
It was what shared principles across Persian, African, and Latin American thought can strengthen cooperation today?
Well, I think it's kind of one of the weaknesses, no, that we see when it comes to human rights work is the lack of cultural exchange in a way. You have to be a scholar, a researcher to read about different genocides, be interested in it, see the commonalities, the common strategies, and all that. It takes a lot of work, a lot of expertise, a lot of luxury and time and funding. And it would be great if our governments and our institutions would support a lot more of that work. We've seen it with the Genocide Scholars Association, the weakening, the lack of funding, the lack of spirit to keep on going, and especially now, as academia is sort of exploding under, the threat of AI and major corporations controlling information, then that I think will become even harder. But I strongly feel that that's something we need. We need to learn from each other in order to confront the common threats, for sure, yeah.
Thank you.
I think I will consider that we all together begin to explore the decolonization of human rights. And for long we have couched human rights in Eurocentric, Euro-American, Western terms, but just even from this table, from the conversations we've had, it's important that we begin to centralize the decolonization of human rights in mainstream narrative. It is not a Western concept. I see a bust of Socrates right there, and I know he said the perfect human being is all human beings put together. And that is Ubuntu. So it is not about these philosophers, Greek philosophers, and how that Western world came up with it. We need to mainstream the decolonization of this conversation so that every single culture will begin to look inwards to mold their own understanding of human rights and also push it out there for this dialogue to take place. That way it is owned by communities and cultures and not just like some Western concept being pushed down the throat of different societies across the world. That would be my good contribution. Thank
Thank you. Okay, that is a great segue to opening up a Q&A with the audience. Please, yes.
My question is to Dr. Babakian, and the panel can answer that too. You talked about Cyrus 2,600 years ago. In 2025, the age of internet, we're still talking about human rights. Where did we go wrong? Are we as human beings just incapable of treating each other as equals? And who do we hold responsible for what's going on? Are the parents responsible for raising children with to be greedy, misogynistic, racist, or supremacist? Is religion responsible for spreading intolerance? I am just baffled that many years ago we did not know each other. We were living in different parts of the world. Now, in the age of internet, but everything travels so quickly, we should be not even talking about it anymore. This should have been settled a long time ago. What are your views on that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's very fascinating. It's a lesson that I learned from a lot younger person than I am. There is a sentence in my book that says, what is missing in human nature that we allow events like Armenian genocide or the Holocaust to happen? And I've been discussing that and asking students, and when I was giving speeches. And in one of the speeches, a younger man, he was about 40 years old or so, a PhD in philosophy, he said, Dr. B, I'm surprised you're asking that question. Human nature, by its nature, is violent. No other species kill each other, our own species, because of power. Animals kill each other because they're hungry or they're at risk. And says if human beings treat each other well, we should be pleased. And this is exactly what I was talking about, that I think each one of us should be vigilant. In one of my speeches, a mother stood up and she says, as a mother, what can I do? Even the country, the armies cannot stop. It was 2013 or 14. They cannot stop genocide or human killings in Syria. What can I do as a mother? And I said, the only thing really we can do is, you cannot as a mother stop what's going on today in Gaza or in Ukraine, or 10 years ago in Syria, 15, 20 years ago in Darfur. But we can do, as a mother, you can do something. These things would not, hopefully would not happen 25 years from now, by raising your children morally. So I think it's, as I said, it's so sad to see, not even in Iran, in civilized Western countries, I don't have to name, that there is human rights or social justice violation every day. So I think it starts from, if we can do something from ground level, from family, from the schools, teaching our children. I truly believe in, especially in countries like this, believe in voting. Vote, vote, vote. Teach our children to vote for the right people, because elections have consequences. Look at the Supreme Court today.
Hi, I would like to thank you all for your talk today, especially by the fact about enumerating cultural soft power. That's pretty much what I'm writing my capstone on in art activism. So I actually had a question about the moral legitimacy of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I'm going to read off because I was ruminating about it as you guys were talking today. So as we're able to kind of interpret these rights to be allowed to be accepted to all people, they are inherently subjective rights. And these were propagated up by the United States and colonial powers during the creation of these rights to kind of facilitate the essence of ensuring that other countries would follow democracy. I thought it was interesting that the only right that was mentioned earlier was the right to democracy. I thought that was peculiar. So within that, these recognition of rights on a global scale are often not followed through, not adhered to, and are unenforced. For example, I would like to provide two examples. The first example would be in the evolving workers' rights in the mid-20th century of the United States, when the workers were guaranteed rights after they were seen as a form of power, in contrast to the American government, and then were stripped away with the neoliberalistic Reagan administration following that. These were rights that should be given to people. Another case is the European the European Court of Human Rights in the Azerbaijan case for political dissidents, where the case voted in favor of the Azerbaijan government, which allowed them to keep political dissidents within their country, and there are still those today that are not allowed to leave the country, which is obviously a human rights violation. So, how can we ensure or even recognize that human universal rights as a theory, not as institutional actions, are not only rooted but currently placating the democracy-enforced capitalist power dynamics that exist today, if the very courts and institutions that are meant to enforce them are kind of just echoing the very basis of capitalistic ideology? And then if these recognitions of these rights, which are subjective, I appreciated the recognition of kind of some of these Greek scholars, but Greek perspective on this kind of topic would be considered objective rights and not subjective rights, which make them not a part of the Greek language doesn't even have the capacity to say, I have a right. They would be only able to recognize that there is a right between the community, which I think Ubuntu should be encouraged when addressing these rights, but I felt as though that kind of example was a little bit idealistic. So as someone who's trying to go into international security and international policy, I'm curious onto how we're able to change the narrative to maybe enforce these principles of Ubuntu when the systems that we exist in are failing, especially in the very moral, theoretical framework and infrastructure that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was created upon. So any advice or I'm open to any perspective that would kind of help me see it a little bit better through your eyes. So thank you.
My answer is yes and yes and yes, so I'll let you guys talk.
It's the idea of enforcing Ubuntu that is problematic here. Ubuntu is a state of being. We cannot enforce Ubuntu. We can become people who have worked on our mindset to the extent that we have transformed, we have evolved to begin to become people who consider ourselves connected at the deepest level of our humanity to others. So I honestly do not know how to enforce Ubuntu, never even imagined enforcement of Ubuntu. It is education, as the founder of Suka University of America would say, value-creating education. Educating the mind, educating the human person, education, a holistic and well-rounded education, which is what indigenous education is about. Not educating people to become lawyers or doctors without connecting at the deepest level of their humanity with people. And I'm glad this is a liberal arts college where we talk humanity. We hope this doesn't go with this, whole capitalist onslaught. But yes, how then do we make more people be? We are human beings, not human doings. We cannot do Ubuntu, we will be. And if we are not, it will not work. That's what it is. So my quoting Socrates is that you're right. He said it as an ideal situation when he lived. He had no idea of Ubuntu, of course, but he imagined and he spoke it out from that idealistic place. That was an idealistic quote from him, nothing close to the reality of his times or what transpired after he lived. I mean, that's really the much I can say about that. Education, formal education, informal education, non-formal education. How do we educate, again, children, adults? I hope that's possible, to have that transformation, that mindset that will cultivate and make us be, without anybody hovering over us, demanding it of us, judging us, jailing us for not being Ubuntu or something of that, or doing Ubuntu or something of that nature. How can we become people who are compassionate and connected with other fellow human beings, regardless of what they look to us or what we think about them or whatever the case may be? Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for your question. It's a great question. It will take a semester to answer, probably. But to be very brief, for the Latin American perspective, Southern Cone, Argentinian perspective, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was instrumental in protecting people's lives when there was no judicial system. When there was a coup d'etat and there's a military government where people are being kidnapped, taken to clandestine detention centers. So victims and human rights activists and also activists in general, including left-wing guerrilla fighters, had the only document they had to protect their own lives was the Universal Declaration. So it was sort of a lifesaver of sorts, no? And if you read about the history of the drafting of the Human Rights Declaration, it's also interesting to know about the participation of Latin Americans, what they brought to the table, which was very significant, in fact. Some of the things was women's rights, labor rights, and habeas corpus. No? Now, when we look at the news at night and we see those boats being blown out to smithereens, I'm thinking about the Universal Declaration. No? And I'm thinking about everyone's right, everyone, including those accused of carrying terrorist acts, to appear in a court of law and defend themselves from those accusations. And that's a huge problem we've had in Latin America for the last 50 years. No? That is the corruption, the complicity of the judicial system with governments, no? To persecute people, imprison them without due process. So for Latin America, that document continues to be very important, no? In spite of its shortcomings, its controversies, etc.
I had a question for Dr. Babaknia. So you mentioned using art to advance awareness about human rights and poverty, and especially for young people. What opportunities are available for young people like myself to get involved using arts to promote human rights and fight poverty? As an artist, I'm interested.
I think the fact that you're here today is a great start. It's a wonderful start that you are interested in the fact that you're here today. I honestly, when I started my writing books, 2006, when I was more than 50 years old, I was not aware of what you are wearing today. So, any opportunity, what Sarah does at young age, getting involved in organizations as such, and having the courage of speaking up. And as I said, I am baffled. I don't really know what word to find out about the courage that the girls in Iran having right now. They have shown us that how much human beings, human spirit, how great human spirit could be. So just getting involved in start from the small things, the smallest step. And one thing I'm telling my own nieces and nephews, start writing. I wrote my first book when I was 22 years old. And that book, when I look at it right now, was really as a result of the human rights, violation of human rights. And I really want to take about 2 minutes to discuss it because it's so beautiful. When I look at it right now, 50 plus years later, at 22 years old, which is almost your age, to have that kind of dignity to do what I did. In 1967, when the 60-day war in Israel was, the second day of the war, Israel paralyzed all the air force of the countries. And a fanatic classmate of mine slapped me in the face, and he said he was angry with the situation, that he said, because you're a Jew. And honestly, up to then, I didn't know I'm a Jew. Because at the time in Iran, we were so, Nora can attest to that, or Mehrdad can attest to that, we were living so peacefully with each other. So instead of returning the slap and getting in fight, I decided to write a book about Jewish contribution to human civilization. And I wrote a book about Jewish winners of the Nobel Prize when I was 22 years old. And to me, that was the first start of act of me to show that human rights and human dignity and living in peace. So writing is a beautiful thing to do.
Well, it's very challenging, no? Because money is a big thing for supporting museums, spaces of memory, institutions. Public universities, for example, there was a threat by the Milei government of making students pay tuition in Argentina. Argentina, you don't pay to go to the university, you know? Including foreign students or students from other countries in Latin America. So we have a lot of students from Bolivia, Peru, Colombia that come to Argentina to study at the University of Buenos Aires. So Milei threatened to create a tuition fee, you know, and we know how that ends because Chile has that situation. So about 1.5 million people came to the streets and protested, and they stopped that, no? But that was one battle, but there's many fronts, including the disability front that I spoke about, where the government was taking bribes in order from the disability program. So, which is, I mean, you can think of a most horrible crime than that, no? So it's very challenging, but art has become very important. Musicians, singers, filmmakers continue to do their work as much as possible, although once again the government has defunded the National Institute of Cinema, so there's no money for making movies. Netflix is taking over our national streaming service. So the battle is in every single front you can think of, no? But so as always, the hope is on social movements for Latin America. No? What can groups of people, communities do to battle these assaults on all fronts? We have, for example, the environmental situation that I spoke about with mining. We have indigenous communities, indigenous activists, you know, environmental activists that are fighting that war. Many of them are assassinated. As you probably know, Latin America has the largest number of deaths related to environmental issues. So it's a very critical and difficult time. We'll see what happens with new elections, and the US government has shown that its intention is to interfere either by a military operation or by financing. They've done it in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, in the Honduran election and in the Argentine midterm election. So that's another worrying sign for Latin America. But I'm always hopeful about the fighting spirit of our communities, but without any support, that's just not going to be possible.
This was just kind of an open-ended question, but this kind of notion of civilization I noticed came up a lot, and I don't know if you guys are familiar, I'm sure you are, with Professor Edward Said, but he would discuss kind of this post-colonial idea of civilization and how historically it was sort of weaponized, and we're kind of seeing that play out today, which I think a lot of speakers or audience members have mentioned. So I guess my question is, as a young person, as a student, this idea of sort of selective memory we seem to face a lot when civilization is introduced into the conversation, this idea of what a civilized society looks like. So I was wondering how you feel that concept has been weaponized in the past, if you feel it's more of a narrative than an objective truth, and how helpful maybe you feel this idea of a civilized society is moving forward to be more globalist than individualistic, maybe, since that's what we've discussed a bit.
Thank you for the question. You absolutely, young people are asking questions about the whole concept of the idea of progress. Whose idea of progress? And the fact that young people are under so much pressure to climb a certain unilinear or have a certain unilinear perception of what progress is. And the higher up they climb, the generally reported more unhappy and isolated and lonely they become. The competition becomes more fierce. You keep thinking it will get better. So there is a lot of questions, especially from young people, around the idea of progress as advanced by Western culture and Western civilization. And the decolonial movement is gaining ground today. Even rest as a form of resistance. The fact that rest is seen as lazy in some civilizations is also coming under question. So I wouldn't even have an answer. I don't have an answer, except that there are conversations going on today. And I guess you already are a part of that conversation from your question. I am also a part of that conversation. And we are all having this conversation, questioning who set this standard about what defines civilization. And where are we today with those conversations? And where do we go? How do we envision, what is our vision of tomorrow, of the children that we want to have in 25 years? Do we envision our children being so worn out, trying to achieve, or be achievers by someone else's yardstick, and feeling so disconnected from life and humanity? I mean, mental health is such a huge challenge today among young people. We are having these conversations, and we hope this conversation will lead us into more cyclical or secular idea of progress, much more than this unilinear, perception of what an ideal society should look like. Again, it is all about having dialogue, having conversations around some of these topics. I guess that's much I can say. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
I think it's a great question. In Latin America, we have this dichotomy or binary opposition between civilization and barbarism, because of European immigration and the extermination of indigenous populations, campaigns of extermination of indigenous populations, and the widening of our populations by the arrival of European immigrations sponsored by the different governments, particularly in the Southern Cone. So we always lived in that world of this opposition between the civilized and the barbarous. But as a result, we have an amazing theoretical work on this issue. Paulo Freire, Marini, Teotonio dos Santos have written extensively about this issue of progress. Progress for who? Yeah. More businesses for who? Who's to gain from all this? And that continues to be the central question. Do we want to keep growing? Do we need to keep growing? What are the models of development that we want to look at? The US, China, or others, So I think now a lot of young people in Latin America are thinking about embracing alternative ways of thinking about development, which is a slow down development. We don't need to grow as much as we think we do. What's the trap in this impulse of always having more, growing more, bigger GDP, more financialization of our lives? What's at stake when young people don't know what are they going to do for work? No? Work has become a huge issue for young people in Latin America. What are my opportunities in life? No? Should I go to college, not go to college? Should I do crypto, not crypto? And all this stuff now that young people are bombarded with. And also, last thing I'm gonna say is this assault on the history of literacy. By being bombarded with digital technologies, digital commodities, I see a detachment from material real world, which is what we need to live: water, food, and clean environment, housing, labor, and all that. So is that, I think, a moment of great epistemological doubt.
Thank you. So, I just really, what amazing questions, first of all. One of the questions from the gentleman working on your capstone about the failure of institutions, right, to uphold rights. It reminded me of, do you remember, Tomas? You'll remember this. In 1998, General Augusto Pinochet was arrested under house arrest in the UK for his crimes against humanity and genocide. And shortly thereafter, Tomas and I were both at Stanford, and we were visited by one of the judges from the International Criminal Court, Carlos Castrosana. And he did a whole talk about, in spite of all the odds, right, sometimes there are windows of opportunity. And so part of change involves being ready to recognize those windows and then step into them against all odds. And I was thinking that there might be a way to bring together this idea of becoming Ubuntu, not necessarily learning the philosophy, mastering it, right, enforcing it, but becoming it on an individual level. And maybe these two ideas can come together, right? The window of opportunity and being ready for it through compassion, dialogue, thinking a lot about these principles that are ancient, that we've been talking about today across cultures. So I really hope that we can all keep the conversation going. We have a beautiful reception waiting just outside with some gorgeous art, and we can keep talking. But I'd like to invite up Sarah for some final words and recognitions.
Thank you for staying with us through such a meaningful and moving conversation. To our panelists, Professor Ardeshir Babaknia, Professor Chika Izobu, and Professor Thomas Crowder. Your voices carried us across civilization and centuries. You reminded us that human rights were shaped not by theory, but by memory, struggle, and memorial courage. Thank you so much. And to Professor Christy Wilson, thank you for guiding the panel with clarity, empathy, and the kind of thoughtful artistry that brought every thread together. We are especially grateful for Professor Wilson and Professor Babaknia, whose artistic and scholarly contribution also enriched today's exhibit, and to Professor Wilson and Professor Crowder, whose guidance helped shape parts of today's program. As we turn toward closing, I want to honor the youth and volunteers who built this day from the ground up. The slides behind me highlight each contributor, a reminder that human rights are asserted not only by declaration alone, but by hands, voices, and the hearts working together. This event grew through students' leadership, creativity, and the quiet courage of showing up week and after weekend. They create something meaningful for our community. To our interns, Davina, Ariana, and Malik, your work shaped our human rights voice this entire year. Our 300 posts and hundreds of visuals that reach thousands of people. Much of that impact is gathered to the Human Rights Day newsletter you received today, a report of how our work moved our community. To our technical lead, Nasair, thank you for keeping every transition steady and seamless. To Joy, Kaden, and Vicky, our photographer and videographer, thank you for capturing the spirit of today so it can travel far beyond this room. To our event day volunteers, SOCA students, SOCA Writing Center students, and the UNAOC volunteers, from registration to the guest support to the memory tree and the art exhibit, you made today intentional, welcoming, and human. And a special thanks to Jay, whose coordination and volunteer leadership ensure every part of today ran very smooth and with purpose and care. And a heartfelt thanks to Brian from SOCA University, whose venue setup and support made this entire program possible. And a special thanks to Dariush Asadi, joining us from Iran. Thank you for creating our Human Rights Day clip with such care, depth, and artistic honesty. Your work carries the heart of this year's theme and helped bringing the story together. To our student colleague, Ariana and Malik, your leadership shaped the architecture of this entire program, from research and visual to structure and flow. Your imprint is everywhere. You were not behind the scene, you shaped the scene itself. Before we transition, I want to recognize Ariana and Malik one more. For 5 months, they walked with me from the first outline to this final moment. Your leadership reflects the next generation of human rights work. Ariana and Malik, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Ariana Amiri. I am a third-year International Studies and Political Science major at UC Irvine. For the past 9 months, I've had the privilege of interning under United Nations of Orange County under guidance of Dr. Sarah Balk, whose leadership has truly shaped the way I understand human rights work. Dr. Sarah has shown me that advocacy isn't abstract, but rather something we build every day through creativity, community, and consistency. Through the projects I've worked on with her, including the 30 days of UDHR, 17 days of 17 SDGs, and our monthly International Days of Advocacy series, as well as event preparation up to this day, I've learned how storytelling, education, and digital activism can spark a real lasting impact of change. Working on today's event has reminded me that even small acts of engagement, sharing posts, having conversations, and showing up all contribute into a bigger global impact. Thank you all for being here today and for supporting our work and standing with us as we continue our work towards human justice and human rights for all. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Malak Shaheen and I'm a third-year student at UC Irvine, double majoring in International Studies and Business Information Management. I'm also one of the interns for the United Nations of Orange County, and I'm so happy to be here, and thank you to everyone for coming. I just want to thank Sarah for being an amazing manager. She's always so hardworking and sweet, and I'm very thankful for everything that I've learned working under her these past few months. I've enjoyed working on many of the marketing materials for this event, such as the flyers, outreach, and updating the UNAOCC website. And this internship and event means a lot to me personally because I am Palestinian, and I've always known that I want my work to contribute to something greater, like supporting our community and human rights around the world. So again, thank you, Sarah, for this opportunity. And whether you're here as a guest, a volunteer, a student, a professor, or just someone wanting to learn, we're so glad that you're a part of this community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, both. I'm really proud of you, and it's the time that I think we can trust the next generation, and I think that we are on the correct way. And when I see students, they grow up, how they contribute, how they passion, and how they donate their time to us, so it's like I feel like peaceful in mind, because I think we are ready for the transition, and I don't need to be worried about the next generation. Thank you so much. It's now my honor to invite our President Dave to offer our closing remark, and then we can enjoy our social time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I hope you all, I'm sure you all, feel as grateful as I do for these last few hours together. What a wonderful experience, and really want to thank our panelists and Dr. Wilson as well for her terrific moderation of this discussion. And so we all continue to learn. And my big takeaway, I think, is the idea of collaboration and the need to really come together in order to achieve these ideals and this vision. And what I love about one of the things I love the most about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which, by the way, wasn't frankly just a Western creation. It actually was formed by a panel of folks from around the world, including somebody from China, who's was a strong Confucius-oriented person, etc. It is, and it does, frankly, come to what the UNA is about, which is we are here to support why we need the UN in the world, right? And the UN is really the only organization that represents a global collective to come together around these issues, and has been able to achieve a global appreciation and adoption of something like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which then led to the most important next step, which is the Sustainable Development Goals for the world, as they all directly link to each other. And that, of course, is a major focus of our chapter. How can we bring the sustainable goals to our community here in Orange County and beyond? And so, again, we invite you all to participate with us in this journey, and we appreciate your being involved with us today. And again, thank you so much to our wonderful panelists, to our moderator, and Sarah, to you as well for presenting. Now let's all go and enjoy the time together, and let's have some good refreshment, and thank you again, everyone.
Describe to me, I know this is very hard, you could do one word or 3 words. What is human rights to you?
A better future.
Thank you.
Please, that's okay. Well, if you think about the Latin American documentary film tradition, it began like late 50s, early 60s. There were many of the filmmakers were trained in Italy, and the Centro Sperimentale del Cinema in Italy. So they had, post-war Italy, coming back from that horrendous period of human history. Filmmakers begin to engage in how to make films about the struggles of Italians in the post-Second World War cities, for the most part. So Latin American filmmakers were trained by many Italian scriptwriters, cinematographers, directors. Then they came to Latin America and began to train people, make their own movies, and it created like a cohesive film movement. We call it El Nuevo Cine Latinoamericano, New Latin American Cinema. And there were many, many documentary filmmakers dedicated to tell the story of their countries during the different dictatorships, during what we call Plan Condor, Operation Condor. So it was really interesting because it was 20, 25 years, 30 years of exchanging ideas, cinematographic strategies, bringing cinema to the people, kind of educating people about the power of cinema, but also bringing the voices of those that were repressed, tortured, families of disappeared, to create like the real history, counteracting the dictatorships in states. And I think many new generations have like found in those filmmakers great inspiration from their work. So we have a very interesting, powerful, progressive grassroots film movement even today, in spite of all the pressures from lack of funding, from streaming services, from social media. still young people continue to make documentary films about, kind of the plight of the people, which is very, very critical and important for our communities.
So, I mean, does that kind of going to what you said is making sure that we stop the erosion of collective memory?
Correct.
Is that
Yeah.
kind of say documentary film would not be its main purpose, but
Correct. Yeah, it's amazing to have the privilege of like screening those films in my classes year after year, 25, 30 years of watching Nostalgia de la Luz, or La Batalla de Chile, and seeing, quote unquote, the protagonists of history giving testimony. Every time I show the film, to me, it continues to be very moving to hear the voices of those that were kind of at the forefront of this human rights struggle. Yeah, it's amazing that there were filmmakers young at the time that had the clarity of mind to understand that it was central to preserve those voices, document those voices, and preserve it for the future. Yeah.
wow. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
My name is Chika Esiobo, and I teach at Suka University of America. And I am here today as one of the panelists in today's event. Yes.
And so, can I ask you just really quickly, what is human rights in 3 words for you?
Human right in 3 words would be dignity of the human person. To young people will be to forgive the previous generation, do not hold their lack of understanding of certain realities that we know today against them. That will help young people to build a new future without anger and without the destructive tendencies that come with regrets and shaming others.
Yeah.
Because as a community, we younger people and older people still belong to one society. So to let go of hurt and aggression and to try to craft a new system.
Yeah.
Of course, with knowledge from the past, indigenous knowledge that the generation today ignored. So young people might have to reach back to as far back as possible in history. And of course, with also what we know today, be able to build a new future for themselves and the coming generation.